Right behind Black Lotus, Charizard might be the most iconic trading card of all time. But how? I mean, Black Lotus makes sense. It's one of the first trading cards ever printed and arguably the most powerful card in Magic the Gathering. But Charizard? Sure, it was one of the first Pokemon cards, but let's be real, it wasn't even good, not back then, and not now. Just looking at the card, you'd think it was an unstoppable force in the Pokémon TCG, with 120 HP, the highest of any base set Pokemon at the time, and a devastating 100 damage attack. It seemed like it should dominate the competitive scene, but in reality, Charizard was not a viable card in serious play. The big issue was energy cost. Fire Spin may have done 100 damage, enough to knock out almost anything in one hit, but it required 4 fire energy. And worse yet, you had to discard 2 of them every time you attacked. In a game where energy acceleration was almost non-existent, this meant you had to constantly reattach energy turn after turn, making Charizard just way too slow. Meanwhile, the competitive meta revolved around fast, efficient basic Pokemon, not high-cost evolutions. Cards like Hitmonchan, Electabuzz, and Scyther were the real threats of the era. They could attack quickly with minimal energy investment, allowing aggressive decks to deal damage early and often. A deck built around Charizard, on the other hand, required evolving from Charmander and then Charmeleon, and finally to our favorite fire-breathing Lizard, which gave opponents plenty of time to set up and take control of the match. Another major issue was that energy removal and super energy removal were incredibly common. These trainer cards let players discard energy from their opponent's Pokemon, and because Charizard required a massive energy investment to function, it was an easy target. In the end, despite being one of the most visually intimidating Pokemon in the base set, Charizard never became a competitive powerhouse. It was the card every kid wanted to play, but those who tried quickly realized that speed and efficiency mattered far more than raw power. Instead, Charizard became something different. A collector's dream, a symbol of status, and ultimately, the most coveted card in the game for reasons that had nothing to do with tournament play. But why? For many, the obsession began with Pokemon Red. Charizard was the face of the game, its giant wings stretched across the cover, practically daring you to pick Charmander as your starter. And most kids did. Not for me, of course. For me, it was Blue Boy all the way. But for probably 2/3 of the kids that picked up the game, the Charizard evolution line was their first introduction to the world of Pokemon. And then there was the anime. Ash's Charizard wasn't just strong, it had personality. It was rebellious, independent, and at times completely ignored Ash's commands. That made it even more cool. And over the years, Charizard would return time and again. Not just in the show, but in movies, special episodes, and even later Pokemon generations. It never faded into the background, remaining front and center as a fan favorite Pokemon. And of course, it's a dragon. Even though Charizard wasn't officially a dragon type in the video game, it had everything a dragon should. Wings, fire breath, an intimidating stance. People love dragons, and Charizard was, for all intents and purposes, the dragon of Pokemon. I mean, come on, what's more of a dragon? This round thing that delivers mail, or this gigantic fire-breathing lizard? It looks pretty clear to me. And again, there's the trading card itself. In the base set, Charizard was tied for the highest HP and had a devastating attack. Even if it wasn't competitively viable, just holding a Charizard felt like owning the ultimate Pokemon. And then when Pokemon Gold and Silver introduced shiny Pokemon, Charizard's alternate form turned jet black, instantly making it one of the most sought-after shinies of all time. As if it needed to be any more iconic. And compared to Dragonite's shiny, well, I'll let the Vomit Green speak for itself. All of these things combined to make Charizard the most iconic Pokemon of the era, but it only begins to explain how this one Pokemon became the face of the entire TCG. One of the biggest factors in Charizard's meteoric rise wasn't just nostalgia, it was the emergence of professional grading. In the early 2000s, sending a Pokemon card off to be professionally graded was almost unheard of. Sure, a sports card had been graded for years, but Pokemon? That was still considered a kid's game. Most collectors were content with binders full of raw cards, trading them back and forth without much thought about condition beyond, hey, this one looks cool. But that all changed when companies like PSA and BGS entered the scene. They offered collectors a way to authenticate, protect, and most importantly, assign a numerical value to their cards. Suddenly, that same Charizard sitting in an old shoebox could be sent off, slapped in a tamper-proof case, and returned with a score from 1 to 10, a number that could make all the difference in its value. At first, grading was just a niche practice used by serious collectors, but as time passed, something incredible happened. The Pokemon boom of the late 2010s, fueled by social media, record-breaking sales, and a wave of childhood nostalgia, put graded cards in the spotlight. And just like that, they became the new standard. Today, if you're buying a first edition Charizard, you're not just asking if it's real, you're asking about its grade. And the difference between those grades, it's incredible. A PSA 9 first edition Charizard, already a near mint card with only the smallest imperfections, can sell for tens of thousands of dollars. But a PSA 10, that's a different league entirely. See, getting a perfect 10 is not easy. The first edition base set print run was notoriously rough, with centering issues, print lines, and edge wear appearing straight out of the pack. Even fresh pulls had defects, meaning only a small fraction of Charizards would ever achieve the elusive PSA 10 rating. Here we can see the actual distribution of PSA graded first edition Charizards. Out of the 4,600 copies that have been graded with PSA, only 125 have graded a Gen Mint 10. Compare that to the 729 copies that have graded a PSA 9, and you can see why this label in particular holds such high value to collectors. This extreme scarcity has turned Charizard into more than just a collectible. It's an investment grade asset. Over time, more and more collectors, many of them from outside of the Pokemon community, started pouring money into high grade copies. Grading didn't just increase Charizard's value, it changed the entire way we look at Pokemon cards. Today, it's the norm. And for better or worse, it's a big reason why first edition Charizard is now in a league of its own. But that's only part of the story, and things definitely didn't start out this way. Back in 1999, a first edition Charizard was the ultimate flex. If you had one in your binder, you were basically the king of the schoolyard. But while kids were trading entire collections just to get their hands on this card, nobody back then could have imagined what would happen to its value a decade later. At the time, Charizard wasn't a luxury item. It was just a cool card. Maybe worth 40 to 50 bucks if you found the right buyer. And by the mid-2000s, prices had crept up into the hundreds. And by 2016, a PSA 10 first edition Charizard was already selling in the low thousands. Then came the 2020s, and that's when things got really crazy. During the pandemic-fueled collecting boom, prices exploded. In December 2020, a PSA 10 first edition Charizard sold for $369,000. A few months later, another one broke that record, coming in at $420,000. At that point, Charizard wasn't just a collectible anymore, it was a status symbol. And then Logan Paul took things to an entirely new level. In 2021, Paul stepped into the ring for a boxing match against Floyd Mayweather. But it wasn't just his fight that made headlines, it was the card hanging around his neck. He wore a BGS Pristine 10 first edition Charizard, a grade so rare that only a handful exist in the world. And unsurprisingly, he wasn't shy about its value. He claimed the card was worth $1 million. A statement that Beckett Grading Services later backed up in a social media post, touting the highest value Pokemon card they had ever graded. Paul's flashy display was a turning point. It showed just how far Pokemon cards, and especially this Charizard, had come. Once a playground treasure, now an ultra valuable investment tier collectible, worn like $1 million championship belt. All this hype, starting in 1999 and continuing through today, never really faded. And the Pokemon Company, they knew exactly what they had in their hands. So no, unlike Magic the Gathering's Black Lotus, Charizard was in no way immune to reprints. If you had to pick one Pokemon card artwork that defines the entire hobby, Mitsuhiro Arita's base set Charizard would be the obvious choice. This iconic illustration, Charizard mid-roar, wings spread, surrounded by swirling flames, was burned into the minds of an entire generation when the English Pokémon TCG first launched in 1999. But this same artwork has been reintroduced again and again over the years, almost like a rite of passage for each new wave of collectors. Of course, it all started with the first edition base set Charizard, the holy grail of the Pokemon TCG. This was the first time Arita's artwork made its debut, and it set the gold standard for a high-end chase card. But almost immediately, we got two more versions. The Shadowless print, which removed the first edition stamp but kept the same early layout, and the Unlimited print, which added a shadow to the border and gave us the classic layout that we recognize today. And a few years later, the Pokemon Company decided to bring Charizard back in the wildest reprint set of its era, Legendary Collection. This gave us three more versions of the original artwork: the Standard Holo, the Non-Holo Rare, and most famously, the Legendary Collection Reverse Holo, which introduced the firework foil pattern, one of the most chaotic and recognizable holo treatments in Pokemon history. Fast forward to 2016, and Pokemon's 20th anniversary brought us Evolutions, a nostalgia-fueled reprint set that recreated base set cards for an entirely new audience. Arita's Charizard returned once again, this time with 4 new versions. The regular holo, paying homage to the original base set foil, the reverse holo, keeping the evolution holo pattern but making Charizard itself non-holo, the pre-release promo featuring a signature gold stamp, and for an even more exclusive chase, the staff-stamped pre-release version, reserved for Pokémon TCG tournament organizers. And as if that wasn't enough, Pokemon's 25th anniversary celebration set in 2021 took things to another level. This time, they reprinted Arita's artwork exactly as it appeared in the base set, but with one major twist. They printed it on metal. The gold-bordered solid metal Celebrations Charizard was something completely novel for the hobby, giving collectors a whole new way to collect this iconic card. Alongside that, we also got a regular Celebrations Holo version, which kept the classic look but added the 25th anniversary stamp. All in all, the Pokemon Company has printed at least a dozen different versions of this one Charizard artwork. And yet, no matter how many times it's been reintroduced, it never loses its appeal. It's a card that defined an era, and even today pulling one, whether from an Evolutions pack or a Celebrations box, still brings that same rush of excitement. And just for good measure, here are the PSA 10 populations for each version. Enjoy! Despite the countless reprints, the first edition Charizard has never lost its place at the top. If anything, the demand has only grown, with each new generation rediscovering its magic. The game has changed, the market has evolved, but one thing remains true. Owning an original first edition Charizard is still the ultimate achievement for Pokemon collectors. And with scarcity increasing, nostalgia deepening, and the Pokemon franchise more popular than ever, the future of this card looks as bright as the Celebrations Reverse Holo. It's not just a piece of cardboard. It's history, and its story, far from over. Now if you want a crash course on all Pokemon cards, check out this video next.